For everyone with an interest in MASH, or more broadly, steatotic liver disease, Surf's Up, Season 5, Episode 18 of Surfing the MASH Tsunami, in which we take a look at a new project, HOPE, targeted at patients with decompensated cirrhosis needing holistic support, starts now.
Today, on Surfing the MASH Tsunami.
We're starting out a program called HOPE, which stands for Healing Others with Peers and Education. We are a peer support advocacy organization, and we are also advocating for people to understand their disease better, both on the physical and mental health side of things.
There's not a group for people that have harmed their bodies due to their consumption of alcohol.
They say a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. You guys are on step 3, right? Step 4, maybe step 10.
I haven't met a transplant patient yet, maybe just one or two, that doesn't want to help somebody that's coming behind them.
So really what sets us apart from some of the other programs, outside of the fact that it includes both people with AUD, ALD, and transplant, is the education piece. It's also because we have this comprehensive support above and beyond just a meeting a week.
As the mossled world gathers in Milano, Surfing the MASH Tsunami is taking this opportunity to introduce listeners to an exciting new patient support program generated by advocates. Join pricing and forecasting guru Roger Green and this week's guests, Sober Liver's founder and visionary, Jenn Jones, and principal strategic advisor Beth Lehman, as they discuss HOPE, their new program for patients with ALD and decompensated cirrhosis. Today on Surfing the MASH Tsunami.
Remember to stay tuned after this episode for this week's question of the week.
Hi, this is Roger Green, host of the Surfing the MASH Tsunami podcast. As I'm posting this episode, most of the mossled world is in Milano for the EASL Congress 2024. I'm home helping family members with a medical issue. All is good, all went well. Now everybody just needs to heal. The quieter week of not being in Milano gave us an opportunity to introduce a significant patient support program initiative that will launch next week, HOPE, from Sober Livers and their compatriots at the Fatty Liver Foundation. This effort is targeted at a dramatically underserved audience, patients whose ALD has led them to decompensated cirrhosis and all its nasty sequelae. Listeners have already met Jenn Jones, the founder of Sober Livers and guiding light behind this project. Today, you'll also meet Beth Lehman, a strategist volunteer at Sober Livers and an equally vulnerable person living with ALD and other related challenges. So, listen to their story, support their program if you're so moved, and stay to the end when we'll discuss our EASL coverage from afar. Thanks. It's Tuesday, June 4th. Tomorrow, EASL kicks off in Milan. You'll probably be hearing this on Thursday, June 6th or later. Unfortunately, as I've hinted to you guys over the last couple of weeks, we had a medical thing in our household. I wasn't able to make it to Milan. Happily, everybody is 100% healthy, and within a week will be better than they were before we started this, but means I'm not getting there. More about that later. What it does do, however, is it gives us the opportunity to dedicate this week to taking a look at an exciting new program, Explore HOPE, from Sober Livers. Now, you folks have met Jenn Jones. She's been with us before. Hey, Jenn, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thank you for having us, Roger, to discuss a very exciting project that we're working on.
We're all going to use the word exciting so many times, it's going to get boring listening to us say exciting, but please forgive. It's a really cool thing they're doing. And then also with us, we have first-time guest Beth Lehman. Beth, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much. How are you, Roger?
Where are you today, Beth, geographically?
I'm in Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay. Greetings to hot Atlanta. And since you've not been with us before, can you take a couple of minutes and tell us a little bit about your path to be here? Kind of what you do, what you've done, and how you get to where you are today. And then when you're done, I'll have one more question for you.
Okay. I was diagnosed with end-stage cirrhosis in 2019, and I actually went straight from a primary care physician up to a transplant hepatologist, and I do credit that PCP with saving my life. I was just in denial. I drank a lot. I knew I drank a lot, and I knew it would catch up with me. So during the transplant evaluation, they uncovered liver cancer as well. And at that time, I already had 5 tumors. So it was pretty advanced, and more than likely, I'd been walking around with it for about 2 years. During that evaluation, they also found tuberculosis and a few other things too. So I wasn't near as healthy as I thought I was. And then got my transplant in April of 2019. And when I woke up in ICU, I had the word that came to my mind as rebirth. And that is not a word that I would normally use in my conversation. So I took that as a sign and by the great gift given to me by a male that was 43 years old in North Carolina, I now have this second chance. And since we know that alcohol-related liver disease, it's not an individual sport, right? Your family's involved. So I took a year to think about it. Do I really want to go public with my story? I am in Georgia in the Southeast, and I have some Baptist members in my family. So there's some looks on drinking that are not favorable. So I decided to go forward. And on April 19th of 2022, I went public with my story for the first time. 6 months later, I think Jenn, that's when you saw me speak at the liver meeting in 2022. And she got to talking to me about this organization. And I'm like her, I really thought there was going to be some support out there. And there isn't for people with alcohol-related liver disease. You know, I was sick during COVID, so I kind of chopped it up to that. But in reality, there's nothing out there for people like us.
Before you were diagnosed, did you have a job or a career or things that you were working on and doing in your life when you weren't making yourself sick?
I did. I was a financial IT consultant. I graduated college in 96 when we all thought the world was going to end for the year 2000. So everything was kind of turned towards the computer industry then for consulting. And so that's where I was, based in Atlanta, but flying out every Monday, coming back every Thursday. I was with Ernst & Young, and the last 3 years with them, I was commuting to Los Angeles every week. So that got extremely old. I attribute that and priority airplane seating and things like that to my drinking a lot, because when you're in LA by yourself, you're in a hotel room, you have a pretty healthy per diem, you're bored. You know, I like to tell people that I spent a lot of money on therapy to realize that I drank because I was bored. And so I really, really think that that's because I didn't drink in high school or college. So I didn't consume until I started working. But then I switched to a career to IT consulting here in Atlanta. And then I was planning my wedding. My husband told me that I was working in the telecommunications industry. People were getting laid off all the time. So he said, you know, go ahead and quit your job, but you're going to have to do some volunteer work when you're not working. So then I had no job, and all I was doing, it gave me a career for drinking is really what it did. Mm-hmm. Well, I quit work in 2010.
So that was 9 years of pounding it like that,
yep.
Huh?
Yep. My average was 3 to 4 bottles of wine a day. And, you know, I only drink red wine. I didn't think I was going to get in trouble with that, right? For all you out there listening, red wine can get you in trouble just as much as a scotch on the rocks, you know?
I'm casually guessing that that's also true of white wine and rosé.
I think you're onto something there, Roger.
With all that, now tell our audience one thing about you that they wouldn't know or necessarily suspect if you didn't tell them, please.
I'm an avid aviator, I guess. I used to fly before I was...
So now you fly, huh?
Yeah, and with, you know, not medicated. I used to fly a lot. And then, of course, with diseases like this, you get grounded. So I am currently grounded, but my eyes are always towards the sky.
Can you get ungrounded at some point?
You have to not be on certain medications for about 10 years before the FAA will unground you. And I'm not on any medications that I can currently fly with, nor will I be for the rest of my life. So I am permanently grounded.
So you're at least death plus 10 away from being able to fly again, huh?
You got it right there. Yep.
So for those of us who are listening, in your next life, if you get on a plane and the pilot says, "Hi, my name is Beth," then you'll know that she managed to maintain sobriety unmedicated after her transition to the next lifetime. You know, that's different.
And if that happens, come into the cockpit and say hello to me, please.
Yeah, very good. So with all that, just simple groundbreaker, which we always do here. One good thing that's happened in your life in the past week, personal or professional. Brave one, go first.
I'll go first. I mentor a lot of people going through the transplant process. And after the fourth time was a charm for my mentee this past week. After he was offered 3 livers that eventually ended up not being viable, on the 4th time, it was a charm. So, and I just got done visiting him at the hospital, and he is doing fantastic and will be released on Thursday. So I'm so excited to see people that I've worked with through the process to finally get their dream and to be healthy. And he looked at me today and he said, you know, I can smell roses for the first time in 30 years. Someone had sent him some flowers and he was crying because he could smell a rose, because you do not realize what all the toxins in your body that your body retains when your liver's not working. So that was a very nice thing to happen to me this week.
That could be our best thing that happened to anybody this month. That's great. Actually, today's June 4th. That's a low bar. At the end of the month, it could be the best thing that happened to anybody on our podcast this month. That's great. Fantastic. Thank you, Jenn.
Oh, it's going to be hard to top that one because Beth is really in the thick of things. She visits hospitals, she visits patients, she's got mentees out the wazoo. I've got a few that I work with, but Beth is really boots on ground. And so we are just really lucky and blessed to have her as our principal strategic advisor for Sober Livers. And with that said, Sober Livers is set up to where education is a very strong piece, a tenet of our program. So we have been gathering health professionals over the course of the past year who have been interested in joining us at Sober Livers. And we were able to get everyone together for a meeting on Monday, less 2 people. And so we had 10 really prominent hepatologists and people in addiction medicine and mental health all gathered together to talk about Sober Livers and the HOPE program. And just getting that all together was just a feat in itself. And I was just really happy the way things ran yesterday because it was a challenge and we conquered.
Brava.
Jenn worked hard to get that meeting together.
Yeah, Beth, I was going to say, before you added to get that meeting together, that's not a past tense statement. Jenn works hard.
There you go. She does.
I could do that one in 3 words and stop, Yeah, I get it. I get it. I guess mine is apropos of recently, we're all healthy here again, completely healthy here again. And there's a long story, but long stories come to great endings sometimes. And this was one of those.
And I think you just topped my best one. I think yours is now the best one. So
the only difference is that we were 98% sure what the outcome of this was going to be last weekend. The big leap was earlier. This was not such a big leap. This was just cleaning it all up. Okay, with that, let's roll into our conversation. Usually I ask our guests to start, but I want to start this a little bit. When Jenn was on, one of the times she's been on in the past, we wound up talking about nomenclature and the benefits of the nomenclature system. I think I've been pretty vocal since forever in saying that there were things about it that I wasn't so sure about and things about it I was sure about. And one of the things I was sure about is that creating a broader umbrella called SLD and bringing alcohol into the same tent as fatty liver. And then even beyond that, creating a disease called Met-ALD, which recognized the idea that here's a stunner. People with bad diets sometimes drink, or people who drink sometimes have really bad diets. I know we're all shocked. By the way, we do this as an audio, but you should see Jenn is laughing out loud and Beth has a astonished expression on her face, which is completely made up. At any rate, I thought that was really exciting. And frankly, I think I met Jenn at whichever, maybe it was last liver meeting last year.
Yeah. That's where it was.
Around the whole idea of nomenclature and that we were all in the same party now. And shortly after that, Sober Livers and Fatty Liver Foundation joined up. Jenn's been with us a couple of times. But I'm really excited about this and what you're doing because you don't have to have a drinking problem to know that drinking problems don't get spoken about frequently. And it's really hard to get support if you're not lucky enough to look under 19 rocks, one of which happens to have something under it. So going public like this with something that's large and bold is just so exciting. And I believe will help so many people. I'm thrilled that we're getting to do this. So with that, I'm going to step back and let you all talk about your program for a while. Whoever wants to go first, go first. I gave you a list of a couple of things I'm hoping we get to cover, but all yours. Take it.
And I'll have to look at that list. But thanks, Roger. I'll start off and then I'll throw the ball over to Beth to talk about some of the important notes of our program. But we're starting out a program called HOPE, which stands for Healing Others with Peers and Education. And both of the end parts of that HOPE are very important. We are a peer support advocacy organization, and we are also advocating for people to understand their disease better, both on the physical and mental health side of things. So holistically, we want people to understand that even if they're not part of a multidisciplinary clinic per se, the importance of looking at all of these areas. The HOPE program itself is a no-cost peer support and education program that's dedicated to people with AUD or AUD remission, which stands for alcohol use disorder. And also, and that's a big and, also have liver disease as a result of alcohol or have had a transplant as a result of alcohol. Now, you mentioned nomenclature, and as you can see, Roger, that lovely chart is right in the back of me right now that talks about the nomenclature. I live it, I breathe it, and I believe it's going to be a lot larger than what we originally forecasted. So anyone who has liver disease because of alcohol, and that includes people with metabolic dysfunction, are welcome in our community and at the table. So I'll let Beth talk about what the program actually offers and what they have access to, and then we can go from there.
I've got a pretty big mouth. So once I decided to go public, I went public in a big way. And so I've talked to a lot of doctors, and peer support is one of the best ways to get somebody through an illness. Look at cancer. You always go and you talk to somebody that has had the same kind of cancer and things like that. But alcohol, let's look at that. Who are we we that drink alcohol? In my head, it was the man on the park bench, laying there with the paper bag with the bottle inside. And that's the image that I got. I still say that the day I had to tell my parents I was sick because of my consumption rate was one of the worst days of my life. And as I've gone public, I've realized that there were more and more people that had this shame and this guilt. I had my first experience of going to somebody and having a conversation and going, oh, wow, me too. We want people to come to our organization and be surrounded by a group of like-minded people. I've done some recovery programs. I've done the 12 steps, and there's no group for people like us in those traditional recovery programs. They have a group for men, they have a group for women, LGBTQ, and all of this, but there's not a group for people that have harmed their bodies due to their consumption of alcohol. So we're here to fill that void.
2 questions. What about the idea that you are people who've harmed your bodies makes you a different population within the 12-step community than, say, people who've been drinking forever but either haven't harmed their bodies or aren't aware that they've harmed their bodies?
Well, you bring up a good point there, because I do think there's a lot of people out there that haven't realized the depths that they've harmed their bodies. But when you have liver disease because of alcohol, you've got a whole nother set of complications, right? So a lot of the conversations are around procedures that you have to have. They say, okay, look at his beer gut. That's actually a symptom, fluid in your belly. If we're sick, we have to go and get, a procedure done to have that removed. It's so nice to be able to talk to people that have to do the different medical appointments that you have to do and the medications that you have to take when you have liver disease. And that's someone that has not gotten to the point where their bodies are failing, would not necessarily have in common with a transplant recipient or a pre-transplant patient. But the one thing, and Jenn, don't hate me, I'm going to use the word, but Jenn hates it when I use the word alcoholic, because, and I think alcoholic is a very personal word. Some people choose to use it, some people don't choose to use it. Jenn, what is your term? What do you use?
I'm a person in remission from alcohol use disorder, long-term remission.
Right.
Takes a lot more discipline to say that one, but go ahead.
Yeah, I take the easy way out. I was using a lot of words before. Now I'm going to stick to one. But that part is the same with everybody. If you have the disease of alcohol use disorder, you have the same disease. Now let's just take it a step further. And, I kind of coin it together with, we would be great in a recovery program for women, right? I'm a woman. I would be in a women's group, right? But then let's just say that they have a group for farmers. And I'm using that because I know that there's a dating show on TV about farmers. And then let's just say they take that group and they divide it down into farmers with chickens, farmers with horses, and farmers with goats. Those are all subcategories that do exist in a recovery program. And I actually asked them the question, what about a subcategory of people that have had a transplant? And they didn't want to touch it. And I think it's because it's medical. There's a lot of terminology, and they don't want to try and be known as a substitute for the medical physician, which we are very strong in that sober livers is not a substitute for your medical physician. However, we've been through all the same procedures. We take the same medications. We're not going to give you dosage. We're not going to give you advice to contradict what your doctor says, but we can talk you through it, because more than likely somebody on the sober livers group meeting has been through what you are up against. And that's the biggest difference.
So help me. This is kind of the guts of my question. I have a friend who, I want to say 3 years ago, his partner, thin, healthy, smiling, laughing guy. 3 years ago, his partner came in and found him on the floor throwing up blood. And at the end of the story, it turned out that he was Child-Pugh B. Now, they've been able to manage that so far with medication, and he's gone to drinking non-alcoholic beer, and he seems to be fine. I'm wondering how far, when you say people have done damage to their bodies, are we talking about people who have gotten to the point where, would he constitute, in your mind, someone who's done damage to his body, or do you have to go somewhere past that? How are we defining that term?
Well, I do think it's subjective. I think that if you are to the point of throwing up blood, then that certainly qualifies you. Jenn, you had more of the cirrhotic type symptoms where I kind of went straight into the cancer symptoms. So what do you think about that?
Well, it's a great question. And number one, what you're talking about, a varices bleed, is so incredibly dangerous and very scary for people to think about. I know from my own experience, it's one of the scariest parts that I think about that could happen to me is throwing up blood, because if you don't make it to the hospital very quickly, you will die. So they have what's called compensated cirrhosis and decompensated cirrhosis. And when when you go into a decompensation stage, which is where I was at when I ended up in the hospital in 2018, that means you have the ascites, or the fluid in the belly that Beth was talking about earlier. You have varices, large varices in your throat that could, or esophagus that could pop at any time if they're not banded during an endoscopy, where a doctor goes in with a camera and basically takes a look at how big those varices are and bands them. So your friend that you're speaking of, that's a very troubling sign, and it's a very troubling symptom of a decompensation event that has happened to his liver. So my recommendation is definitely that you need to be with a hepatologist. You need to get an MRI, see how far along you are. You know, they have really great MRIs right now. They can tell you a lot more many times than a biopsy can. I would say, yeah, drinking non-alcoholic beer is one approach, but non-alcoholic beer still has alcohol in it. So it would be much better to choose another option for your drink of choice. But quitting drinking is hard. And I've talked to a lot of physicians about harm reduction lately. And so it's like, what can we do to get people to get to a sober point or get to that abstinence? Because the liver will regenerate, but once it's cirrhotic, like I have right now, it's considered recompensated, meaning it went from a decompensated state to a compensated state. But that's as far as I can go right now, because there are no treatments outside of abstinence or a transplant. Those are the only two treatments that are currently available outside of the new treatment for steatotic liver for people who have metabolic dysfunction, but it isn't good for people with alcohol.
And remembering, by the way, that most of this audience is an audience of health professionals and corporate execs.
So they know what we're talking about. We can use the terminology.
Which is why I went straight to Child's Pew B. Yeah, go ahead, Beth.
Yeah, if I could jump in, and that's actually what I had. The other thing about the non-alcoholic beers and the non-alcoholic wines and things like that, for a true person with alcohol use disorder, it's the whole package, right? So drinking that non-alcoholic beer mimics a behavior, and that is a behavior pattern that is synonymous with drinking and drinking too much. So you want to be careful when trying to drink these non-alcoholic beers and all that, but like Jenn said, they do have a certain percentage of alcohol in them, that you are not trying to use it as a substitute. Because if you are, then you haven't really looked at the behavior and why you're doing it. You know, I actually went through extensive therapy, and I had to before they would put me on the list for transplant to make sure that I was serious about changing my behavior. So I just want to put a caution out there about those non-alcoholic drinks if you do have a problem.
Okay. Let's talk about the elements of your program. As I say, about a decent chunk of our audience are providers, either physicians or allied health professionals, a decent chunk of those in the U.S. So I think those people would want to know exactly what's in the program, understanding now that the purpose is to provide peer-to-peer support in a place that peers have never been able to get support. Paint a picture of what that support looks like, please.
I'll start, and then Beth, if you want to add in to anything that I may miss. We are creating a comprehensive program for people with alcohol-associated liver disease or transplant due to alcohol that also are struggling with or in remission from alcohol use disorder. And as I mentioned before, it is a no-cost program. And initially, we are starting out with meetings once a month on the second Tuesday of every month. And we're going to have meetings that are going to be truly just support meetings every other month, where we are talking with our members and asking them how their day, how their week, and any questions that they may have for medical professionals, in which we're going to make a list of these things. And then the next month, we'll have a medical professional come in, either from the mental health side or the physical health side. And that can include anybody from a hepatologist to a PA to a dermatologist, because there are so many facets that come together and so many needs for somebody who has alcohol-associated liver disease. And as Beth said one day, she doesn't need any ologists added to her doctor list, but you're met with a lot of ologists when you're there. So another thing that we're offering our members, the people who come and participate in our meetings, will have access to a private Facebook group. And this is going to be private just for the people who choose to come to our meetings, so that people can continue the conversation. And for people who are not, that may be a little gun shy and talking about their story, this may be another venue where they can talk. And then in addition to that, we'll be doing blogs every week and providing education and resources for all of the people that come to our meetings. And so that's where we're starting. We're going to scale this based on participation. We anticipate having weekly meetings eventually, where 1 week out of the month would be dedicated to education. So really really what sets us apart from some of the other programs outside of the fact that it includes both people with AUD, ALD, and transplant is the education piece. Because LifeRing, I will mention LifeRing just because I've been going to this meeting for about 6 months now, and the facilitator of this meeting, Sue, has been incredibly helpful to me. But they do have one meeting about medical, and this is one of the things where, when the tide is high, all the boats will float. And so I saw a gap. I didn't know about this program ahead of time, but I do see the differentiators that we have between a LifeRing meeting and us. And it's also because we have like this comprehensive support above and beyond just a meeting a week. So that's some of the things about our meeting. And then the whole health advisory council that we just met with yesterday, and they are so enthusiastic about helping us to answer medical questions, to be presenters, and to ensure that people are getting good information, credible information, and we don't have, as you know, misinformation that goes out far and wide and a lot faster than true information. So that's what we hope to provide our people. And it's for across the board, from if you just have steatotic liver disease caused by alcohol, all the way through to you may be years past having a transplant, because we think having that group together, people can learn from each other. But eventually we will start targeting like some of these other organizations, a women's group, a men's group, maybe ethnicity. So as we grow, we're going to be shaping this organization for the people who become a part of it. Beth, do you have anything to add to that?
I don't want people who have, or physicians or providers to think of the transplant patient as a cured patient, that kind of thing, because I say it all the time. And sometimes I say this to prove a point if I'm struggling or not, but the transplant fixed my body. It didn't fix my brain. So the same issues that I had when I was drinking are still in me, and I have to use tools that I've learned to stay sober. And I will share something here that I haven't shared much with anybody, is that my drinking addiction has quickly become a shopping addiction. And, it's the same behavior, same thing like that. And it has gotten to a point where, I now submit receipts for everything I get to my husband. You have to understand the behavior. And as the post-transplant patient, there's a place for you within Sober Livers, because not only can you keep learning, did you know you have to go to a dermatologist every 6 months? And also for the chance for you to share your experiences with those that are coming behind you, which I haven't met a transplant patient yet, maybe just one or two, that doesn't want to help somebody that's coming behind them. Because I tell everybody, I think they implant like some kind of juice in you when they do the transplant, that for some reason you wake up, you've received this gift and you want to go help somebody. And that's very common.
Yeah, we're finding that a lot with people stepping up and stepping forward. And with that said, with what Beth just said, is as we have our groups and our Facebook groups and other things, people are going to bubble up to the top that want to help other people. And we would like to have them start mentor peer program where they are actually mentoring people one-on-one as well. So that is in the mix of what we're doing with Sober Livers and with the Hope program too. So and Beth makes a really good point, which is why we're looking at this very holistically, and we're looking at the mental health side of things, because most people who have alcohol use disorder also have some sort of mental distress as well, be it anxiety, depression, PTSD, like I have. I have all three.
They may not know it at the time, which I didn't. I thought I was fine. And then through therapy realized, no, I wasn't fine.
So if I were a physician or a provider and I had a patient who I thought needed to find their way to Sober Livers, do you have, or the health professionals you've been working with, do they have thoughts about a way to do that will be encouraging as compared to pushing people to recede deeper into whatever shell they're in?
Yeah, just in the past 2 weeks, I've been in hospitals a lot and distributing my card and some Sober Livers documentation. And the doctors and the nurses that see this information are, number one, first excited about it, because anytime you are going through cancer, let's take, for example, they're more than likely going to give you some information for the American Cancer Society if you haven't already picked it up from the pamphlets that were sitting in the lobby, right? I had to visit a surgeon yesterday with my husband for heart valve replacement surgery. Right there in the room was a support document for a group to support for them. So the key for us, and where this podcast really can help us, is getting the word out there that we're there. I have not not met a physician, a nurse, anybody in the medical industry that does not feel like this is a good idea. So the biggest problem we have is just letting them know that we're there. And so I dumped a bunch of cards off at the hospital. So we'll see. It's grassroots is what it is.
So for anyone who's listening to this and wants to know more about how to get material from you all or help their patients, the website is soberlivers.org?
That's it. soberlivers.org. And there is to come to one of our meetings, and this is really important. We're not sharing the Zoom link out to everyone. You must sign up first. It just asks a simple question. Do you have liver disease? How you found out about us? And we get their email so that people can receive an invitation to join the meeting. And that's for everyone's safety and protection. That's what we would encourage people to do right there on that front page of the website. There's a way to link yourself over to that page, and it's very simple to fill out. And so for any doctors or any physician assistants or nurse practitioners or nurses that are out there listening to this, all they need to do is go to that website or share that website with their patients. But they can also go there to find out more information about us and who we are and what the HOPE program really is.
Boy, I have a lot of questions. So here's the first one. 14 years ago now, time flies when you're having fun. 14 years ago, I was diagnosed with adjuvant melanoma. It was never on my skin, but they found it in a lymph node, and they took that out, and then there was a recurrence, and then obviously I'm fine, 13 years clean. But during the first year of that, I went to various support groups that I found. And what struck me is that frequently this support group was not the person with the disease, but a spouse or partner. In fact, the second email that this podcast ever got was from a woman who thought her brother had ALD, although it wasn't called ALD. And how do you tell, and what do you do to get him to stop drinking? So I'm sure that the community that wants to know how to support, either bring a family member to look in the mirror or to support them as they're deciding to not just look in the mirror, but walk the path. Do you have ways to support those people in the system?
Yeah, Roger, that's a good point. When I speak, there's people coming up to me at the end, and everybody has a brother, a sister, a friend, an aunt, an uncle, or somebody like that they're worried about, right? That's one area where Sober Livers, I think, has the potential to grow, because like we're having a meeting for people with ALD right now. This is our first meeting, but you bring up a good point. What about the caregivers? Because each one of those people more than likely has a caregiver. So we do want to move into a caregiver group meeting as well. My husband has kind of dipped and delved into a couple of caregiver meetings that are out there, and he has brought up some really good points. And I do think that that's a need out there. If anything, it starts the conversation. Somebody admitting it is the first step, right? That's what they say. But I think the conversation is to be started. And that's exactly where Sober Livers wants to take this. Jenn, fill in.
I agree with Beth. It was a very hard decision for us to make as to how we wanted to start and if we wanted care partners to be part of the meeting itself. The reason we're separating it right now is because there's some things that people want to say in front of other people that have their same condition that they may not feel comfortable having their care partner here. And vice versa. Care partners are going through a lot, but they don't necessarily want the loved one in their life to know how they're feeling necessarily all the time. So care partners, having a care partner program will be a vital next step for our organization. And we're looking forward to finding the right people to lead those types of groups. So yeah, it's of utmost important. I mean, I know my significant other, he takes off of work every time I need an endoscopy. And, he hasn't had to support me like a transplant patient has to be supported, but I go to doctors all the time, and he's always watching out for hepatic encephalopathy, which is when you get ammonia in your brain. Most of your listeners will know what this is, HE. So he's always on the lookout for me to sound looking like I may be drunk, but knowing I haven't drank a sip of anything. And so, yeah, it's a hard job. It's not easy. And we want to give them tools as well.
That's stage 2, huh?
Stage 2, yeah. Mm-hmm. Sober Livers 2.0.
So what else do you see down the road for Sober Livers? How do you see it rolling out? And what day will you say, click, we hit goal 1, And what day will you go, wow, we're really out there? What'll tell you that?
One thing that is very important to me, and I know a couple members on our WAC also have asked this question, but what about in-person meetings? My dream is for Sober Livers to go viral, that people like what we're doing, that we will get more people. I want more people than we can handle, so to speak. When you find that you have a certain amount of people in a certain location, and my guess, if I had to guess, it would be congregated in cities that probably have bigger transplant centers or things like that. I don't know, but I think maybe one day we could start doing in-person meetings. The concepts and all of this stuff kind of happened when COVID was still being talked about, right? But now that we're out of COVID, I think that could be, as well as, and Jenn, I'll let you talk about this more, but the separation into different groups as well, like men and women, things like that.
Yeah, and I think I talked a little bit about that, but when you were talking about when would we consider what we're doing a success? One of the things we're going to do is we're going to do some surveying and we're going to benchmark and we'll do some qualitative and quantitative work so that we can see that this is an effective community that's actually helping people. That's important to both and when Beth says WAC, that stands for Whole Health Advisory Council. They're our WAC. I love the name. So we want to be able to provide data and information back to them. Although I cannot say the pharmaceutical company or the grant amount yet, I would let you know that we have received our verbal agreement for our first grant with a pharmaceutical company, which is absolutely phenomenal. And we're so excited and we need those grants to sustain us. They also want to see how we're going to sustain ourselves. And that's by showing our strategic plan and how we want to grow with these types of different meeting times, because as you know, we're a national organization. And so finding meeting times that work for everyone is a little bit difficult. Right now, we are starting with 7 p.m. Eastern time, which means that we're going to have a lot of people at 4 o'clock over on the Pacific Coast time where they may not be out of work yet. So we're going to anticipate that our growth may look interesting at first because maybe we're not getting enough people. And if we change that time around and offer a second meeting, we may see more people who want to participate. And we'd also like to have the transplant centers, when people are in the hospital, handing them the phone saying, here's a really great group to join and you can get on right now, because they can share some really good stories and really good journeys and make somebody feel like they're not alone. I know when I was in the hospital for the first 10 days in the hospital and then 10 days in the physical rehabilitation center because I couldn't walk any longer and I had to use a walker to walk because my ascites and my stomach, my legs were so swollen. Letting people know that they're not alone in that, because you feel so alone. So if we can benchmark and really see that part of it is a success, I think that's what that would look like, for at least for me. And I think it would help other people, including trying to get donations to help our program as well, which is so important right now.
And education for anybody that's on a liver transplant path. We're concerned with those patients that have gotten there via alcohol, but there's people that are there through fatty liver, through all kinds of different paths, right? And the transplant path is an important one. And, we really want to focus on education and new things in the liver community. There's liver perfusion now where, you can recover a liver in the evening before and tell the recipient, hey, be at the hospital at 9 a.m. You can start to schedule these transplants out, and then living liver donations. That is huge. And if we can educate our members on how they could go about potentially finding a living donor, that's another resource added to the list, and just so much innovation there.
So here's a question for our listeners. What can they do to help their patients find living donors that they might not be thinking about already?
That's above my pay grade. We need to figure out a way where living liver becomes something synonymous with donating a kidney, right? We all know you can donate a kidney, that kind of a thing. But more times than not, people know the liver regenerates itself too. I get that question asked me by kids all the time. So how do we promote and make a PSA, whatever you want to call it, for living liver without scaring everybody, because you do have to go through some testing and all that stuff. But it should be an option. Here in Atlanta, we have 3 transplant hospitals. One is a children's, but the other 2, one does live livers and one doesn't. It has to be a process where they can say, okay, I think if you do live livers, it's automatically in your communications. But then if you don't, tell people about it. Refer them to the next best hospital for live livers and things like that. We need to tell patients that they have options.
And we have an individual who has joined us, and he's going to be helping us out. And he sought a live living donor because his hospital told him that he could start that pursuit. And he was very good at social media. So he started putting things on social media saying that he was looking for somebody to help him by donating a liver. And he didn't end up getting a live liver, but in fact got a liver gifted to him because of his promoting his need for a liver on social media. And so there's a lot of, unfortunately, people who are good at certain things and promoting themselves are the people who are receiving those donations. And we need to try to figure out how to make it more accessible for everyone, not just people who are good at social media. So I really want to work with the hospitals internally to try to figure out how can we promote this. And then from a policy standpoint, even though Sober Livers isn't policy driven per se, there's a Living Donor Act that we need to have passed so that it's not considered, so the surgery isn't considered elective. Because right now it's an elective surgery, so you don't get the same care and the same time off of work that somebody who is actually getting the transplant, which is not considered elective. And so we've got a couple of hoops that we still need to get through to ensure that the people who are offering their liver as through the kindness and compassion of their heart have the time to recover from that surgery, even though they're doing it robotically now and in certain hospitals and the recovery time has gone down significantly, you still have to recover. And it's really unfortunate that that's how it is right now.
Interesting. So
we've given you more questions than you have for us to think about.
Well, first of all, they say a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. You guys are on step 3, right? Step 4, maybe step 10. I'm not on this journey, but I've been on several and I've helped people on several. So I think a little more downstream. What have we missed? We've talked about a bunch of stuff.
If we could just say soberlivers.org. That is the one thing we need people to remember from this podcast, because that's where you can go and get your information and contact us. We can be contacted too.
I concur with what Beth just said. And I'll also, just because I'm working on fundraising right now, we need donations. And that's something that we really didn't talk too much about. And to create a sustainable program, the last thing I want to do in the world is have to shut down our groups for lack of funds. That is one of the reasons why we've waited this long to start a program, because we need to ensure that it was going to be funded and we would be able to progress with this. And we do have some funding that'll last for just a little bit, but it's not anything that's going to sustain us. So if people out there either have the means to give or know somebody who does, they can also go to soberlivers.org and make a donation to us, which would be extraordinarily helpful. We didn't really mention that we are a 501c3 with the Fatty Liver Foundation. We are an impact program with the Fatty Liver Foundation. You mentioned that earlier in the podcast that we're part of them, but we have our accounting is completely separate from Fatty Liver Foundation. So unless we go in on a grant together, it's up to us to raise the funds to keep our program going.
So Jenn, I'm not going to use the answer to the question I'm about to ask until I hear it. How much does it cost to keep a group going for a year?
Thank you for asking this question, because I actually have a whole spreadsheet as to how much this really would cost us. And I don't have it right off of the top of my head. So if you give me one moment, can you give me one moment?
And I'll just add in here while Jen's trying to pull that up is that she has really laid the groundwork for this. She is the one that did all the work to get us this grant that we have. I'm kind of more of a materials type person with content, but Jenn deserves a lot of credit for this, taking it from a brainwave to an idea, to an actual physical organization that we're going to actually launch on June 11th. And we didn't think that we would launch. If you asked us in some dark times, we would have said no way. But Jenn has really, really laid the groundwork for this, very much so.
Thank you. Thank you, Beth. Eventually, Roger, what we would like to do is, right now we're on Zoom, which is fairly inexpensive to run, but we would like to move to a platform that is even more secure than what we are currently doing. And so that's for a year, approximately $60,000.
On the more secure platform.
Yes, on the more secure platform. Utilizing Zoom would probably cut that cost down in half, but we still need to be able to promote the program. We need to have all of our automation in place, and we need to, have some of the administrative costs that nobody really likes to pay money for, but those have to be done in order for us to sustain. And then we need a way of promoting it and also providing our members with the resources that they need too. So that's approximately how much it would cost, and that's with paying me basically almost nothing. So
audience, I think what we just heard is that either requires a significant donation from one organization or some less significant donations times 5.
Right.
And the times 5 should be easy because they'll all build on each other. We're at the bottom of our hour. This has been fantastic. And what you guys are doing is wonderful and badly, badly needed. Everybody you know knows somebody who you know is in this place, and probably somebody who you know who you don't know is in this place. And if it's only one, then you're living a charmed life. So with that, let's say goodbye to everybody.
Bye, Beth. Bye, Roger, and bye, everyone. Thank you for everyone for listening to this, and please spread the word about soberlivers.org. And let's get started. I'm excited.
Okay, guys, they launch next week on the 11th, which will be a couple days after you hear this, 7 p.m. Eastern on the 11th. So I'll be back with the question of the week and business report in just a moment. I'll talk a little bit about how we're covering EASL. In the meantime, thanks, folks.
And now, here's Roger with this week's question of the week.
And here's our question of the week. HOPE is an effort to provide support through a program designed for and targeted toward a group that needs support that might not otherwise exist and need it badly. Here's the question. What other patient communities, based either in disease stage, geography, demographics, or something else, can you identify that would benefit from a tailored patient support effort like Project HOPE?
And now for the Season 5, Episode 18 Business Report.
Slava Ukraini, glory to Ukraine. Heroyam Slava, glory to heroes, and also Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel live. I have no commentary about these two hotspots this week. Let's just stop for a minute to remember and respect the brave Ukrainian fighters and residents, to remember and wish for the safe and speedy return of Israeli hostages who spent over 200 days in captivity, and to remember and pray for safety for the Gazan residents whose needs are not served well by either Hamas's or the Israeli government's approach to a solution here. Heroyam Slava, glory to heroes, and also Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel live.
Most of the Mossad world is in Milano. Roger is back in Pennsylvania, covering the Congress remotely.
As I speak, the opening session of the EASL Congress 2024 is in the books. The abstract and general sessions will start tomorrow. Later today, I'll post a minimally edited interview with Mike Patel from the Fatty Liver Alliance about his Wednesday at EASL. That'll be on LinkedIn. Tomorrow and Friday, I intend to post a few more. We'll compile these, edit them, improve sound, and probably post them as an episode on Monday. We also anticipate 2 wrap-up episodes over the next 2 weeks. More on those later.
We have started sending Surfing MASH community invitations. Thanks for your excellent initial response.
Our first 95 community invitations went out before the end of May. They netted 8 new community members, another 15 to 16 assorted responses with an open rate of around 30%, all better than what we had anticipated. If you haven't heard from us yet, you will soon. Our priority order is people who started following Tsunami on LinkedIn within the last 30 days, then my first-level LinkedIn contacts, then everyone else. Specifically, we invite you to join our community by enrolling in our private membership list. Now, not to bore you, I talked about this last week, but the benefits include our weekly newsletter, now in its 5th episode, audience invitations for real-time listening, which will start next 2 weeks, and office hours, which will start next week.
As we promised last week, we have new features coming to the podcast and community.
You can consider today's chat with Mike Patel to be our first midweek conversation. I certainly do. We'll initiate our live audience invitations for the first EASL follow-up next week, or if we can't make that work, the second one the week after.
The vault is closed this week in honor of the EASL Congress.
By the time we could publish a vault, this audience should be engaged in attending or following the EASL Congress, possibly in part through this podcast and the personal interviews. Our vault will be back next week along with the EASL wrap-ups. So that's it for this week. I want to thank our team, Bjorn, Louise, Mike, Eric, Steve. As we keep moving forward, please take a listen to our question of the week and, of course, reply. If you're a LinkedIn follower, check your email or messages for an invitation to subscribe to our weekly newsletter and other services. We'll be back next week with our first EASL wrap-up. Until then, stay safe, surf on. Bye-bye now.
Have any questions for the surfers? You can send them to questions@surfingmash.com and we will answer on the podcast or website. Your question might even wind up being the question of the week.